The Biden administration has authorized the transfer of $2.76 billion from Iraq to Iran, Reuters reported on June 10. The news comes within days of emerging reports that Washington hopes to trade Iranian funds trapped in foreign accounts for a halt to further nuclear escalation by Tehran. While the United States has issued sanctions waivers to allow Iraq to import electricity from Iran in the past, U.S. sanctions have prevented Tehran from repatriating funds paid into escrow in Baghdad. Hello, viewer, and welcome as we explore and analyze this breaking story on the U.S. and Iran. Let's get going. There's enough evidence on the surface to suspect the release of Iraqi funds to Iran is tied in some way to the U.S.-Iran indirect nuclear talks brokered by the Omanis. There doesn't have to be a formal deal in place for the administration to negotiate an agreement as defined in U.S. law. A sanctions relief waiver tied to a request to halt higher levels of enrichment would constitute willful evasion of mandatory congressional review. Richard Goldberg, FDD Senior Advisor. Members of Congress on both sides of the aisle must be vigilant in ensuring that the Biden administration does not circumvent their oversight as the White House continues to try to enter an Iran nuclear agreement. Both the House and Senate must leverage all available legislative tools at their disposal to force the administration to be transparent with respect to its Iran policy, which has not been the case. Matt Sweeve, Senior Director of Policy for FDD Action. The Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, INARA, prohibits the president from issuing statutory sanctions relief for Iran in connection with any broadly defined agreement related to Iran's nuclear program in which the U.S. commits or otherwise agrees to take action, regardless of the form it takes, whether a political commitment or otherwise, and regardless of whether it is legally binding or not. Open questions thus remain as to whether Iraq's provision of sanctions relief to Iran, as enabled by the Biden administration, triggers the statutory requirement to submit any agreement to Congress pursuant to INARA. But what is the U.S. position on the supposed cash release to Iran for limited enrichment concessions? Let's explore this in the subsequent part. Multiple reports that suggest the United States is offering financial incentives to the Islamic Republic of Iran in exchange for Tehran slowing its production of enriched uranium is drawing attention on U.S. stance with Tehran. On June 7, as earlier mentioned, Haaretz reported that the United States was offering to release $20 billion in frozen Iranian funds, currently held by South Korea, Iraq, and the International Monetary Fund, in exchange for Iran limiting further production of high-enriched uranium. Another report on June 8 by Middle East Eye, ME, echoed much of Haaretz's reporting, but added that the administration would allow Iran to export an additional 1 million barrels of oil per day, which would likely require the president to issue a national security waiver. The National Security Council called the ME report false and misleading. However, questions remain about whether an agreement may proceed without official text or notification to Congress, as required under existing law. The Biden administration hopes that Tehran will be more amenable to a longer and stronger deal after getting major nuclear and economic concessions in exchange for a shorter and weaker arrangement. This is an illusion. Iranian leaders understand power and leverage better than President Biden and his team do. The emerging less for more deal is the worst deal of all. Mark Dubowitz, FDD CEO. The administration may be looking to evade congressional review by trading billions of dollars to Iran in exchange for a temporary halt to higher levels of enrichment, all without a written agreement or public acknowledgement. Paying Iran to sit patiently on the nuclear threshold won't stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, but it will subsidize attacks against Americans, Israelis, Ukrainians, and Iranians. Richard Goldberg, FDD Senior Advisor. The Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act of 2015, INARA, requires the president to notify Congress of an agreement or waiver of congressional sanctions on Iran. Congress then has 30 days following notification to review the agreement and potentially vote to reject it. Given mounting bipartisan political opposition to lifting sanctions on Iran, while Tehran provides drones to Russia and cracks down on women and protesters, there is suspicion that the administration is searching for ways to sidestep IAEA's requirements in order to provide economic relief to Iran in exchange for a temporary arrangement on Iran's enrichment. But why Israel is opposing the agreement, reserves right to defend itself, is what remains to be answered in a moment. Just follow up with us as we proceed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke by phone on June 8. According to a statement from the Prime Minister's office, Netanyahu told Blinken that Israel's position remains consistent in that a return to a nuclear agreement with Iran would not stop the Iranian nuclear program, and that no arrangement with Iran will obligate Israel, which will do everything to defend itself. That's where we wrap things up for the time being.